Have you ever been judged because of your appearance? It's not dramatic. It's not dramatic. But it's real. A situation that can make anyone's stomach churn. A black female CEO, after 72 hours without sleep, just wanted to sit in the first-class seat that she had paid for. But because of her simple outfit and skin color, she was pushed to the back row. In just a few minutes, she was forced to face the choice that many have experienced. Stay silent to avoid trouble, or speak up to maintain her own respect if it were you, in the middle of a crowded airport, amidst suspicious eyes and spiteful voices. What would you do? Would you dare to maintain your dignity even when the whole world wants to crush it? This story is not about a chair. It is about a moment when pride is tested and the truth is forced to be seen. We invite you to embark on an emotional journey where justice is found in just 9 minutes. If you sympathize, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to start the story with us. The Boeing 787 trembled slightly as its wheels slowed across the long concrete ribbon of runway 22L. The engines, moments ago roaring with confidence, were now winding down in an unsettling, uneven hum. Passengers exchanged confused glances while the captain's voice crackled over the speakers, tight, controlled, but unable to hide the strain underneath. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've been instructed by ground control to return to the gate. Please remain seated. A wave of murmurs rolled through the cabin. A few passengers gasped. Others sat up straighter, clutching armrests. No one understood why a plane that had already begun taxiing toward takeoff suddenly reversed direction, a maneuver rare enough to leave even seasoned travelers uneasy. In row 4, a businessman whispered to the woman beside him, "Planes don't turn back unless something serious happened." And something serious had happened. Something that began less than 10 minutes earlier. Something no one on that aircraft saw coming. As the wide-body jet slowed, a flight attendant in a navy blue uniform stood frozen in the galley, hands trembling despite her attempt to hide them behind her apron. Her face had drained of color. She kept glancing toward the front door of the plane, where a jet bridge was already extending back toward the aircraft, slow, metallic, inevitable. 2 other flight attendants whispered urgently, exchanging frantic eye contact. One of them bit her lip until it turned white. Another clutched her phone, as if expecting a message that might save her or doom her. But the lead purser, Diana Hale, stood stiff and rigid near the entry door, jaw squared, eyes defiant. She didn't tremble. She didn't blink. She stared ahead with a kind of brittle righteousness, the kind that comes from believing one is untouchable, and slowly realizing they are not. Passengers watched as the jet bridge connected with a soft clunk. That sound, the hollow meeting of steel, hung in the air like a verdict. A moment later, the cabin door cracked open. Cold morning air rushed inside, carrying the scent of damp pavement and jet fuel. And standing there, silhouetted by the gate lights behind her, was the woman at the center of the storm. The woman the crew had dismissed as just another economy passenger. The woman they had judged by the hoodie she wore and the quiet way she carried herself. Dr. Alana Rivers. The passengers did not know her name yet. They did not know why the plane had been forced back. They knew only what they could see, a calm, composed black woman standing in the doorway, with a presence so steady it seemed to thicken the air around her. She didn't appear angry. She didn't shout. She didn't carry herself like someone seeking vengeance. Instead, there was a stillness in her eyes, deep, heavy, and unshakably firm. A stillness that told anyone paying close attention that this moment was bigger than it looked. She stepped forward 1 measured pace, her soft-soled sneakers making no sound on the entry mat. The flight attendant closest to her instinctively moved aside, as though pulled by an invisible force. No one spoke. Not the crew, not the passengers, not even the baby who had been crying minutes earlier. Silence stretched across the first-class cabin like a suspended breath. Then, from behind Alana, the station manager hurried onto the plane, tie crooked, face flushed with panic, breath unsteady. His name badge glinted under the cabin lights. Miles Keaton. He looked like a man who had sprinted the entire length of the terminal. "Dr. Rivers," he said, voice cracking. We're so sorry for what happened. The CEO is on the line. Right now. He needs to speak with you immediately." Passengers straightened in their seats. The CEO of the airline. And this woman had direct access to him. Diana, the lead purser, finally broke her rigid stance. Her throat bobbed in a hard swallow. Her eyes darted between Alana and the sweating station manager. Behind them, through the open doorway, a cluster of ground crew members stood watching, some anxious, some curious, all aware that something unprecedented was unfolding. But Alana Rivers didn't look at them. Her gaze remained on the cabin, on the people who had witnessed what happened to her, on the people who had laughed, or ignored, or stayed silent. 9 minutes earlier, they thought she was nobody. Now, they realized they might have misjudged a woman who carried herself like someone used to, commanding boardrooms and budgets the size of small nations. Alana spoke softly, so softly that the quiet seemed to amplify her words. "Before I step inside," she said, "I need to know that the individuals responsible for what happened are present." Her voice was warm, low, and completely steady. It wasn't anger, it was authority. Miles nodded quickly, nervously. Yes, Dr. Rivers. They're here. All of them." Alana gave a single, slow nod. Passengers leaned forward in their seats. Some held their breath without realizing it. A man in business class whispered. "What did they even do to her?" A woman replied under her breath. Whatever it was, it must have been big. And still, no one knew the truth. Not yet. All they knew was that the energy inside the cabin had shifted. The shame, the fear, the tension, they all moved like invisible currents, circling the crew members who now understood, far too late, that the woman they dismissed as unimportant was anything but. Alana stepped fully into the aircraft. A moment hung in the air, tense, fragile, electric. And then, everything that had happened earlier, every insult, every assumption, every abuse of power began to unspool. But that was the story of 9 minutes ago. And 9 minutes earlier, everything had been very different. Alana Rivers stood just inside the aircraft doorway, the chilled air from the jet bridge mingling with the warmer cabin air around her. For a moment, she allowed herself a slow inhale. Calm, steady breathing had always been her shield. Years of learning how to survive rooms where people underestimated her had taught her the value of stillness, how silence could become the sharpest instrument a person possessed. But beneath that stillness, something else lived. A heaviness she rarely showed, a tiredness that came from being tested in ways many others never had to face. She stepped further into the cabin, and the low hum of whispered speculation grew behind her. Her posture remained relaxed, yet every movement she made carried intention, as though she had practiced the art of composure long before she'd mastered the art of leadership. She appeared serene on the outside, but inside, a familiar tension slowly began to unfurl, one she had felt since childhood. Her mother's voice echoed inside her mind, warm but worn. "You'll face moments where people see only what they choose. Don't let them decide who you are." Alana exhaled quietly, grounding herself. The weight in her chest eased slightly. She scanned the rows of seats' faces. She didn't know, watching her like she was a figure from a story rather than a person who had walked through the terminal in leggings and an oversized hoodie less than half an hour ago. Moments like this always made her reflect on how quickly public perception shifted once power entered the room. She had never enjoyed that shift. She never wanted to intimidate, influence, yes, inspire, hopefully, but she had never sought fear. Yet today, something deeper pushed at her, a quiet ache that made her feel both exposed and strangely resolute. She glanced toward the first-class cabin, recalling how this entire morning had begun hours earlier, long before any confrontation at the gate. Her day had started in a sparsely lit hotel suite overlooking Lower Manhattan. The clock on her nightstand had read 4:57 a.m. when her eyes opened. She had hoped for another hour of sleep, but her body refused to rest. The all-night negotiations from the day before still pulsed at the edge of her thoughts. Her company, Rivertech Mobility, had just concluded a 72-hour marathon with investors from Arizona to Singapore, a deal that would reshape long-distance freight logistics across multiple states. It should have filled her with pride, but instead, she felt only exhaustion. She rose from the bed and stood near the window, watching the early glow wash over the city, the quiet pulse of headlights, the faint hum of sirens far below. Cities always reminded her of the long nights her mother had returned from the hospital, shoes worn, shoulders slumped, hands trembling from fatigue. Yet her mother never stopped smiling when she looked at her daughter. "You'll go further than I ever could," she would whisper. "You just keep moving forward." And Alana had moved forward, past every obstacle, past every doubt, past every person who thought they could shrink her. She showered, dressed in her simple travel clothes, tied her hair into a loose bun, and left the hotel before dawn. She never traveled with security unless absolutely necessary. She disliked drawing attention. Quiet suited her. It always had. At the airport, she moved through the terminals with her usual unassuming ease, carrying nothing but her backpack and a small canvas tote. She had always believed travel should be simple, regardless of status. But simplicity often invited assumptions, a fact she had been reminded of more times than she cared to count. She reached the gate early that morning, hoping for a peaceful wait before boarding. Instead, the familiar sense of being misjudged returned the moment Evan's sharp suit. Shallow confidence looked her over and made his decision about who she was. She had felt a sting then, a sting she had buried quickly. Her mother's worn-out voice returned to her again in the present moment. People will try to put you in the wrong seat in life, sometimes literally. Don't let them mark your worth. Alana blinked slowly. That quiet ache returned, fuller this time. She stepped deeper into the cabin. Her eyes drifted along the overhead panels. The seat rose, the anxious faces of the crew. This entire aircraft had no idea who she was or what she carried inside her. They had seen a woman in gym clothes, not the leader of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. They saw skin tone before resume, wardrobe before achievement. And though she was accustomed to moving past such moments, this particular incident had pierced an old scar, one she rarely allowed herself to touch. A memory rose in her mind. Uninvited, she was 12, sitting beside her mother on a crowded flight from Atlanta. Her mother had saved for months to afford their summer trip. They had boarded early, smiles bright, but moments later, a flight attendant claimed their seats had been reassigned. Her mother had shown their boarding passes twice, but the attendant insisted something was wrong and told them to be patient. They were eventually pushed to the back of the cabin, into seats they hadn't chosen. While a man in a tailored coat took the seats they originally held, her mother never complained. She simply sat down, folded her hands, and stared at the floor. Alana hadn't understood then, but she understood too well now. She returned her attention to the present. Passengers watched her, waiting for what she might do. Flight attendants shifted uncomfortably, anticipating the consequences of their choices. The air buzzed with expectation. Yet inside her, a quiet conflict rippled. She didn't want revenge. Revenge cheapened the dignity she had worked her entire life to build. But she did want accountability, not only for herself, but for every traveler who had been dismissed, ignored, or pushed aside because of a snap judgment. She paused near the galley wall, her fingertips brushing the edge of a metal service counter. The cool surface steadied her. A part of her wanted to breathe deeply and walk away from the situation entirely, as she had done countless times before. She had mastered the art of letting go. But another part, quieter, older, more wounded, whispered that perhaps this moment wasn't hers alone. Perhaps she was standing in the place her mother once stood, saying the things her mother never had the chance to say. Alana inhaled, slow and controlled, her decision crystallized inside her chest, clear as glass. This was not a moment to shrink, not a moment to remain unseen. Someone had to speak. Someone had to be the wall that stopped the pattern. And this time, she would not walk away quietly. Behind her, the cabin door closed again, sealing the space around them. The gentle thud echoed like the start of something irreversible. She turned slightly and met the gaze of the station manager, Miles Keaton. The nervous tremor in his hands had not faded. "Dr. Rivers," he whispered, "the CEO is waiting for you." Passengers leaned closer. The crew froze. Alana nodded. Her expression softened, not with forgiveness. Not yet, but with resolve. In her calm voice, she said, "Then let's begin." The slow burn inside her finally steadied into purpose. She wasn't here to punish a single crew. She was here to confront something much larger. And the next moments would change everything. The terminal outside gate C-12 stirred with the rhythm of a typical early morning in Newark. Soft announcements drifted overhead like distant echoes. The scent of freshly brewed coffee lingered near the small kiosk by the windows. An elderly janitor swept slowly along the marble tiles, humming faintly. Everything carried a kind of calm hum, steady and familiar, as if the world beyond the cabin door had no idea what storm was building inside the aircraft. Hours before the disruption that forced the plane back, Dr. Alana Rivers had stepped into this same terminal with the simple hope of a quiet journey home. She treasured the stillness of early flights. Fewer crowds, fewer distractions, fewer chances for anyone to look at her and see only labels. At dawn, airports felt a little softer, a little more forgiving. She had arrived long before boarding, dragging her carry-on behind her while adjusting the strap of her small canvas bag. The lights above flickered with their usual sterile glow as she found a seat near the window. She settled into the chair and let her posture relax, aware that her shoulders had carried days of tension. The glass beside her reflected her tired eyes and loose bun. Nothing about her posture suggested the authority she carried in boardrooms, and she liked it that way. Nearby, a teenager wearing a worn denim jacket struggled with an overstuffed backpack. Books bulged from the zipper. A basketball hung from a carabiner. The boy looked frustrated as he tried to keep everything from falling out. Alana reached down and steadied the pack before it tipped over completely. The boy glanced at her in surprise. "Thank you," he muttered, embarrassed. She smiled gently. "You travel often." He shook his head. "First time alone. My mom's nervous. Keeps texting. It doesn't stop when you get older," she replied softly. "My mother used to call during every landing." The boy's expression eased. The moment passed quietly, simple and human. Her morning had been filled with these tiny, ordinary exchanges. A woman with graying hair had dropped her boarding pass near the charging station. Alana bent down, picked it up, and returned it before the woman even realized it was missing. A man in a navy jacket helped her reach a small bottle of water off a high shelf at the kiosk. She thanked him with a nod, and he returned the gesture with polite warmth. Small interactions like these reminded her why she still believed in people, even when others chose to believe in stereotypes. She sipped her coffee slowly, watching aircraft glide along the tarmac with practiced grace. She had always admired airplanes. They represented movement, possibility, and the persistence of human design. Every takeoff reminded her that life, no matter how heavy at times, always offered a path upward. While she sat lost in thought, her phone vibrated. A notification from her team blinked across the screen. Messages from her COO, from investors, from managers, all requesting follow-ups about the massive contract they had nearly finalized. But she silenced the phone quickly. She wanted a few hours where she wasn't responsible for any crisis, any decision, any deadline. She wanted to breathe as simply as the others sitting around her. Then she heard a small cry. Across from her, a toddler clung to his mother's jacket. The child's face was flushed, and his cheeks were wet from tears. Exhaustion had taken over him completely. The mother tried to balance her diaper bag, stroller, and purse while shushing him desperately. Alana could see the strain in the woman's shoulders. She stood and approached without hesitation. "May I help you?" she asked kindly. The woman blinked in surprise. "Oh, I don't want to bother you. It's no bother." Alana crouched slightly and offered the toddler a gentle smile. "Rough morning." The boy sniffed and nodded as though he understood the question. She pulled a small pack of stickers from her tote. She kept them for moments like this. The child's eyes brightened, curiosity overriding the distress. The mother sighed with relief. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're very sweet." "I've had many of these mornings, too," Alana replied. She returned to her seat with a feeling of warmth. Moments like that reminded her of traveling with her own mother, exhausted after 12-hour shifts. Her mother had always tried to make their flights feel special, even when they sat crammed into middle seats with little room to move. Every plane ride had felt like a small gift, the promise of somewhere new, even if that somewhere was just another city where her mother had taken an extra shift. Her mind drifted now to those memories. The faint smell of her mother's lavender lotion. The gentle squeeze of her hand whenever turbulence struck. The soft hum of her mother's voice when she told her daughter stories to distract her from motion sickness. She cherished those moments more now than ever. A young airport agent wheeled a tray of juice past her, offering samples. She accepted a cup, thanked him, and watched him move down the terminal. People watching had always been among her favorite pastimes. Here, in the rhythm of travel, life moved in short stories, quick glimpses of strangers crossing paths, each carrying invisible burdens and private hopes. She looked outside again, watching a thin layer of frost melt along the edge of the jet bridge. Light danced across the wet concrete. The world in front of her was simple, calm, predictable, a calm she wished she could bottle and keep with her on long days. But beneath all that quiet, she sensed the familiar weight building, the kind of weight that came not from work, but from being in spaces where she was always aware of her presence, her skin, her gender, her quietness mistaken for weakness. She had built her life around earning respect through restraint, but restraint carried its own exhaustion. She inhaled deeply, letting her shoulders sink. She reminded herself she had made it through far worse moments. She reminded herself she didn't owe anyone loudness to prove her worth. And she reminded herself, as she always did, that she was enough exactly as she was: hoodie, sneakers, and tired eyes. When boarding time neared, the crowd around the gate became livelier. Conversations rose and fell like soft waves. People gathered their bags, families stretched, travelers lined up in neat rows according to group numbers. Alana watched the movement around her, grateful for the temporary anonymity. She preferred being unseen during travel. She preferred blending in. Little did she know how quickly anonymity would be taken from her. How quickly a simple flight home would unravel everything. How quickly one small moment of prejudice would trigger a chain of events no one at gate C-12 could ever forget. She zipped her tote and prepared to line up. She felt calm, present, ready to head home after long days of negotiations. Her mind carried only the desire for rest, but destiny had its own itinerary. She rose from her seat and walked toward the line, unaware that within the next hour, her life would intersect with the lives of several strangers in ways that would expose old scars, ignite difficult truths, and reshape the path ahead for everyone on that plane. And all of it would begin with a single interaction she never asked for. The moment she reached the gate agent's counter, the morning's gentle harmony shattered. Doctor. Alana Rivers approached the counter calmly, her boarding pass folder tucked between her fingers. She had lined up just like everyone else, patient and composed, ready to step onto the aircraft and drift into a few hours of quiet. The people around her shuffled forward with the soft rhythm of anticipation. A child tugged at his mother's sleeve. A businessman whispered into his Bluetooth earpiece. A couple nearby debated which movie they should download before takeoff. Everything appeared ordinary. Yet in moments like these, Alana always felt that subtle tightening inside her ribs, a tension she'd learned to identify early in life. It was the quiet anticipation of being judged before she spoke, a feeling she couldn't fully shake even after becoming one of the most influential women in the transportation tech world. She had earned degrees, awards, and partnerships, but she had never been able to walk through certain spaces without sensing eyes calculating her worth based on something far more superficial. Still, she stepped forward with a small, polite smile. Evan Marshall stood behind the counter, a man in his early 30s, crisp shirt, hair perfectly styled, posture radiating the kind of confidence that comes from believing his authority would never be questioned. He scanned boarding passes with mechanical precision, tossing occasional smiles toward passengers he seemed to approve of. His charm had edges that revealed themselves the moment anyone didn't fit his unspoken criteria. When Alana reached him, Evan looked up, then paused. His eyes flicked from her face to her clothes, then to her simple canvas tote. His expression shifted, barely noticeable, but unmistakable to someone who had experienced similar moments countless times. "Boarding pass?" he asked. Tone flat. She offered it gently. "Here you go." He took the pass, held it under the scanner, and frowned. The machine beeped, and a blue light flashed. Evan sighed dramatically, as though dealing with an inconvenience brought into existence solely to irritate him. "Oh," he muttered. "Looks like there's an issue." Alana waited, calm. What kind of issue? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he tapped a few keys on the keyboard with exaggerated slowness, glancing at her again as if trying to decide whether she'd understand what he was about to say. "Hate to break it to you," he finally announced, "but this seat isn't available anymore. System reassigned you to a different one." She furrowed her brow. "Reassigned? I didn't make any changes. It happens." Evan shrugged. "You've been moved to 32. Should still get you to San Francisco." Alana didn't react, though her heartbeat nudged upward. "I booked seat 1A, she said gently. "It was confirmed last night." "Right. Well," he replied, leaning back. "Sometimes bookings get shuffled." She held his gaze. "May I ask why only my seat was shuffled?" Evan tapped the screen again with unnecessary force. "Ma'am, the system made the change. I don't control that." Behind her. Passengers shifted impatiently. Alana considered her next words carefully. "Can you show me the record of the reassignment?" His lips curled with thin impatience. "Ma'am, please don't make this difficult." A familiar sting pressed beneath her sternum, the sting of a tone she had heard far too often in her life. Not aggressive, not loud, but laced with condescension. "I'm simply asking for clarity," she replied softly. Before Evan could respond, laughter erupted from the side. A young influencer stepped forward, adjusting his neon-colored jacket. He held a small camera pointed at himself, documenting his every move for thousands of followers. "Dude," he joked loudly, "someone's holding up the line." Evan's demeanor changed instantly. "Hey, man, sorry about the wait," he said, cheerful in a way he hadn't been with her. "You're all set. Seat 1A. Enjoy the flight." Alana heard the words like a blow. Her seat. He was giving away her seat. The influencer winked at Evan. "You're the best, bro." He strutted toward the jet bridge, talking excitedly into his camera. "First class. Baby, Let's go. Alana inhaled slowly. You just assigned him seat 1A. Evan shrugged. We had an upgrade available. High-tier passengers get priority. I am a high-tier passenger, she said quietly. I fly with Weststar every month. He waved a dismissive hand. The algorithm chooses. Nothing I can do. Her pulse throbbed against her wrist. She didn't raise her voice, didn't let frustration spill. Instead, she kept her tone even. I would appreciate speaking with a supervisor. That won't change anything, Evan replied, annoyance creeping into his voice. And we're boarding. You're holding everyone up. She didn't move. I'd still like to speak to one. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Fine, he muttered, before turning slightly and pretending to type. But it's going to take time. He didn't call anyone. Alana waited. Minutes passed. He continued scanning other passengers with cheerful enthusiasm, greeting select individuals with warmth he never offered her. Each interaction emphasized the truth that pressed deeper into her heart. He had made a decision the moment he saw her. The memory of her mother's quiet humiliation years ago resurfaced. Her mother gripping her purse tightly after being pushed to the back of the aircraft for no reason other than convenience for someone else. That same helplessness now threaded through Alana's mind, unwelcome but sharp. A woman behind her leaned in. Is everything okay? Alana turned, offering a faint smile. I'll be all right. Thank you. When she faced Evan again, he crossed his arms. Look, he said, exasperated. If you want to get on this flight, you'll need to take the seat the system gave you. 32E. She steadied herself. I purchased the first-class seat. And I'm telling you that it's no longer available, because you reassigned it yourself, she said, gently but firmly. His jaw tightened. Are you accusing me of something I'm stating what I saw? He leaned forward, lowering his voice into something cold. If you keep this up, I'll have to deny you boarding entirely. Passengers stiffened at the tension. Alana's chest tightened, but not from fear, from the ache of something else, something heavier, something old. She lowered her voice. I don't want conflict. I just want what I paid for. And I want this line to move, Evan snapped. You can board or step aside. Those are your choices. A quiet settled around them, a quiet thick with judgment. Some passengers cast sympathetic glances toward her, others looked away, uncomfortable with the scene. She stepped to the side, allowing others to pass. The humiliation settled deep in her ribs, but she kept her shoulders straight, her breath steady. She waited for a supervisor who never arrived. And finally, when boarding neared its end, Evan gestured toward her with impatience. Last call. Alana held her boarding pass, feeling the weight of the moment. With a final inhale, she walked forward, not because she accepted his treatment, but because something inside her whispered that the truth would reveal itself soon enough. She approached the jet bridge, unaware that the quiet fire inside her was about to ignite events the entire airline would feel before the morning ended. The jet bridge felt colder than the terminal, as though the temperature had dropped several degrees the moment Dr. Alana Rivers stepped onto the narrow walkway. The metal flooring vibrated faintly under her shoes, each step echoing with a weight she didn't want to acknowledge. She held her boarding pass lightly, almost delicately, as though gripping it too tightly would rupture the fragile restraint she was fighting to maintain. She walked at an even pace, measured and slow. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed quietly, casting pale shadows around her. Behind her, passengers shuffled forward one by one, unaware of the storm that churned beneath her composed surface. Her mind, however, was far from calm. She replayed the exchange with Evan Marshall like a scene she couldn't escape. His dismissiveness, his smirk, the careless way he had handed her seat to someone who lifted a camera instead of a boarding pass. The sting of his tone lingered beneath her ribs, sharp and familiar. Too familiar. She paused halfway down the jet bridge, letting the crowd pass her. She leaned a hand against the cool wall, steadying her breath. You're fine, she whispered to herself. Just breathe. Her voice trembled slightly, a rare crack in her otherwise steady demeanor. The humiliation stung, but it wasn't just that. Something deeper had been stirred awake. Old memories flickered like ghosts in the corners of her mind. She saw the outlines of moments she thought she had buried long ago. Her mother's hands clutching her purse strap, the apologetic smile the attendant had forced, the tears Alana had swallowed when she was only 12. This morning felt too similar, too close. She closed her eyes briefly. The ache sat heavy in her chest. But even in her vulnerability, her mother's voice surfaced once more. calm yet unyielding. Stillness isn't weakness. Alana, stillness is strength shaped over time. Her mother had said those words after a particularly cruel incident at a grocery store. A cashier had treated them like inconveniences. She remembered how her mother kept her tone gentle, refusing to let anger define her. And afterward, when they sat in the car, her mother had taken her face gently between her palms and said, "If you let these moments turn you bitter, they take something precious from you." Those words had stayed with her for decades. Yet right now, in the narrow throat of the jet bridge, she felt bitterness threaten to creep in. Not explosive rage, something quieter, deeper, more dangerous, the exhaustion of being tired, of being tested. She inhaled slowly, pressing her back against the wall for stability. The hum of the terminal faded. She heard her own heartbeat in her ears, steady but strained. She wanted to believe the issue with her seat was a mistake, a glitch, a misunderstanding. She always tried to give people the benefit of the doubt. She never wanted to assume the worst. But the way Evan had spoken to her, the ease with which he dismissed her, the effortless manner he had uplifted another passenger while degrading her, those things were not computational errors. They were choices, and choices revealed truth. Her internal conflict deepened. One part of her whispered to let it go, to settle into her economy seat, to focus on getting home, to avoid confrontation entirely. She had important meetings tomorrow. She needed rest. She needed her energy. But another part, older, wiser, bruised, rose to challenge that instinct. What if you never stand up for yourself? What if this keeps happening? What if your silence allows someone else to be hurt next? Her throat tightened. She wasn't angry for herself alone. She was angry for the pattern, for what this represented. People around her continued boarding. A flight attendant's voice filtered faintly from the aircraft doorway ahead. "Welcome aboard." The words sounded emptier than usual. With a final exhale, she pushed off the wall and resumed walking. Her posture returned to its familiar upright grace, but the tension in her jaw betrayed the storm beneath. As she neared the aircraft door, noise filtered from the cabin, overhead compartments opening and closing, murmured conversations, beeps of electronic devices switching to airplane mode. Yet even through the sounds of a typical boarding process, she sensed subtle shifts in atmosphere. Energy held its own language, and she could feel something off-kilter. A couple ahead of her whispered while glancing in her direction. She wasn't sure what they saw, perhaps just a tired traveler, perhaps something more, but she felt their eyes lingered longer than necessary. She stepped inside the plane. The space smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and freshly circulated air. The overhead lights glowed softly, giving the cabin a warm, early morning brightness. A flight attendant stationed near the entrance smiled mechanically. "Good morning," she offered, though her eyes flicked quickly down toward Alana's clothes before snapping back to a polite expression. Alana nodded gently. "Morning." The attendant pointed toward the aisle. "Economy is straight back." The words landed heavier than they should have. A simple sentence, yet weighted with assumption. Alana didn't correct her. Not yet. She simply continued forward until she reached a small open space between first class and the galley. The barrier felt symbolic somehow, like a line drawn by unseen hands. She paused, looking at the plush first-class seats, the ones she had rightfully booked. Seat 1A was already occupied by the influencer, who lounged with exaggerated comfort, camera pointed at his face, living the upgrade life. He joked into the lens. Some folks tried to steal the seat earlier. But hey, first class belongs to the people who earn it. She felt her stomach twist. She wasn't sure if it was anger, sadness, or a combination of both. Humiliation had a complex flavor. At that exact moment, she faced a decision. She could keep walking to 32, stay quiet, avoid trouble, but her feet didn't move. Instead, she stood in stillness. The type of stillness her mother taught her. The type that wasn't retreat, but clarity. She closed her eyes for a second, letting her breath settle the way she had learned during late nights filled with investor pressure and industry politics. She pressed a hand lightly to her stomach, grounding herself. "You deserve dignity," her inner voice whispered. "Not privilege, just dignity." Her heart steadied. She opened her eyes. She was going to face whatever came next, but she would face it on her terms, with the same grace that had carried her through the most difficult chapters of her life, even if it hurt, even if it resurrected old wounds, even if later she questioned whether it was worth the energy. She moved forward with quiet resolve. Far behind her, the jet bridge creaked as the last few passengers boarded. None of them knew what was beginning to unfold. None of them knew the weight she carried into the cabin. None of them knew that in minutes. Their morning would become something they would remember long after the plane landed. And none of them knew that every decision she made from this moment on stemmed from a lifetime of moments just like this one moment she refused to let define her any longer. She stepped deeper into the galley, ready to confront what waited ahead. The storm inside her had settled into something stronger than anger. Purpose. Dr. Alana Rivers stepped fully into the first-class galley, letting her eyes adjust to the softer lighting. The cabin's atmosphere felt heavier than the recycled air alone could explain. A faint murmur of conversation drifted from the seated travelers, but the moment she appeared near the barrier separating first class from the main cabin, a hush rippled through the rows closest to her. She sensed it immediately. Curiosity, judgment, expectation. People knew tension when they saw it. Even strangers could feel when something invisible was hanging in the air. Alana didn't seek confrontation. She never had. But she believed in clarity. And clarity, unfortunately, often required walking through uncomfortable space. She took one slow step forward. Diana Hale, the lead purser, stood a few feet away, checking a tray of pre-departure drinks. She pivoted sharply when she sensed movement. Her posture straightened in an instant. Her jaw tightened. Barely perceptible, but unmistakable. "Ma'am," Diana said, drawing herself up with the practiced authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Economy seating begins behind row 12. I can help you find your seat if you're unsure." The tone wasn't rude, but it wasn't welcoming either. It was edged, stiffened by assumption, an assumption Alana was weary of seeing in so many forms. She lifted her boarding pass gently between two fingers. "I'm in 1A. A slight pause. Diana blinked, then forced a smile. "There must be a mix-up. That seat has already been reassigned." "I'm aware of that," Alana replied, keeping her voice calm. "But the reassignment wasn't authorized by me, and I would like the issue corrected." Diana's gaze flicked briefly toward the influencer sprawled comfortably in 1A. He was still streaming on his phone, narrating his excitement to an unseen audience. "That seat is occupied," Diana said. "We cannot disrupt our premium passengers during the boarding process." A muscle near Alana's temple pulsed, but she steadied her breathing. "I am one of your premium passengers," Alana answered softly. Something in her tone made a few heads turn. Even the man in 1A lowered his camera for a moment, though he didn't bother hiding his smirk. Diana's expression changed, though only slightly. Annoyance flickered, perhaps disbelief. But she didn't move. "Ma'am, you were rebooked in economy," Diana insisted. "We have procedures." Alana studied her face, the hardened stare, the unwillingness to consider that she might actually belong here. It wasn't the policy that troubled her. It was how easily people hid behind it. She held Diana's gaze, her voice steady but firm. "I'd like to speak with the captain." That request startled the purser. People rarely asked to speak with pilots unless something serious was wrong. And something was wrong. Just not in the way airlines were used to addressing. The cabin quieted even more. Something inside Diana cracked a little, revealing the faintest hint of worry. She straightened her uniform and tried to regain control of the moment. "There's no need for that," she replied, lowering her voice to a whisper meant to reassert dominance. "Your boarding pass was changed? That's final. Please proceed to your assigned row." A younger attendant standing beside her shifted nervously, glancing between them. A quiet tremor of frustration rose inside Alana, but she pushed it back. She reminded herself why she was here, why she couldn't just let things slide, why this moment mattered more than her exhaustion. She took a breath and spoke gently. "I'm asking for the captain because the gate agent refused to help me. I'm asking because I was told my seat was given away. And I'm asking because every attempt to resolve this reasonably has been dismissed." Her voice wasn't loud, but the truth in it resonated through the cabin. A man in row 2 lowered his newspaper. A woman near the window stopped typing and looked up. Even the influencer paused long enough to tilt his camera toward the unfolding scene. Diana pressed her lips together. Her composure faltered for a split second before she hardened her stance once more. I'm telling you," she said, "you need to go to the back of the plane." This time the words weren't wrapped in politeness. They were sharp. They stung more than Alana expected. Something in the way Diana said back of the plane carried centuries of weight. And for a moment, Alana felt the heaviness settle on her shoulders. But she would not bow to it. She lifted her chin. "I paid for 1A. Her voice was quiet, nearly tender. "And I'm not moving until this is addressed properly." Silence spilled into the cabin. A passenger 3 rows back mumbled, "Here we go," another whispered. Why didn't she just sit where she was told? Someone else muttered. This is going to delay us. The noise of judgment always came quickest from those who didn't understand the whole story. Diana grabbed the intercom phone, her frustration finally breaking through the thin layer of professionalism. Captain Reynolds, she said, please come to the front cabin immediately. She didn't look at Alana again. Moments later, the cockpit door opened quietly. Captain Thomas Reynolds emerged, tall, composed, his expression neutral. His presence shifted the energy instantly. Authority had arrived. What's the issue, he asked. Scanning the group, Diana gestured toward Alana. This passenger is refusing to take her assigned seat. She was rebooked. She's holding up departure. Alana spoke before the captain could respond. My original seat was 1A, she explained respectfully. It was reassigned without my permission. I requested assistance resolving it. I've only asked for clarification. The captain's eyes softened slightly. She watched him absorb her words carefully, unlike the others who had brushed them aside. He held out his hand. May I see your ticket? She handed it to him. May? He studied it, frowned, looked at Diana. This says she's in first class, he said calmly. Diana stiffened. The gate agent said I can read, Ms. Hale, he interrupted, not unkindly, but with unmistakable authority. Let me verify with the terminal. He stepped aside to make the call. The influencer leaned back in 1A, muttering under his breath, Man, this is great content. Alana heard him but didn't react. She focused on her breathing, on staying present, on refusing to let her composure crack. Minutes later, the captain returned. His expression had shifted, grave, controlled, but undeniably troubled. He looked at Diana. There was no equipment change, no reassignment authorized. Her seat was taken without cause. Diana swallowed. The captain turned to Alana. You have every right to be here, he said quietly. A ripple of discomfort spread through the cabin. The influencer's face drained of color. Before Alana could respond, Evan Marshall burst through the jet bridge and into the cabin, out of breath and visibly annoyed. What's the holdup, he demanded. We need to close the doors. The captain stepped forward. Mr. Marshall, did you override this passenger's first-class seat assignment? Evan's face twitched. Her no? She didn't look like she belonged up. He cut himself off too late. Diana froze. The younger attendant covered her mouth. Passengers nearby exhaled sharply. Someone whispered. Did he really just say that Alana felt the blow deep inside? But she stood steady. The captain inhaled through his nose. Everyone stopped talking, he said softly. The calmness of his tone was more frightening than shouting. A storm was coming. A reckoning moment. And Alana, standing tall near the front of the cabin, felt her heartbeat once steady, strong, sure. A heavy quietness settled over the first-class cabin, thick enough to feel in the air. Dr. Alana Rivers stood still, grounded, as if her very presence anchored the space. Evan Marshall's unfinished sentence lingered like smoke that refused to clear. Passengers stared wide-eyed, some shifting uncomfortably, others frozen in disbelief. No one dared move. Captain Thomas Reynolds drew in a long breath before turning his full attention to Evan. His voice remained controlled, far too controlled for the circumstances. Mr. Marshall, please step into the galley with me. It was not a request. Evan hesitated, glancing at the influencer in 1A as though hoping for validation. None came. Finally, he followed the captain into the narrow galley area. Diana Hale trailed behind them reluctantly, her posture rigid. Alana didn't follow. She remained where she was, her palms loose at her sides, gaze steady. Her heartbeat throbbed, but not from fear. Something else pulsed stronger, a sense that the truth long ignored was finally pushing its way into the open. Snippets of low voices drifted from the galley. She could not hear every word, but the cadence told her everything. The captain's tone was quiet and grave. Evan's was defensive, sharp, unraveling. Diana's interjection sounded thin, brittle. The passengers leaned in subtly, sensing the shift. A woman in row 2 whispered to her husband. I've never seen a crew member talk to like that before. The man whispered back. He crossed a line. That's obvious. Alana closed her eyes briefly. She didn't want drama. She didn't want an audience. She didn't want to be the center of a spectacle. She had lived her entire life trying to avoid unnecessary scenes, choosing grace over explosion every time. Yet here she was. She opened her eyes slowly, grounding herself again in the present moment. Inside the galley, Evan raised his voice. It was a judgment call. She looked like someone who'd get in the way. I was trying to make boarding smoother. By violating her reservation, the captain replied calmly. You don't understand, Evan insisted. These people, the captain cut him off. Choose your next words carefully. A silence followed, sharp and immediate. Diana stepped forward, her voice smaller than before. Sir, maybe he just misread her status. It happens sometimes. The captain turned to her. You had her boarding pass in your hand. You saw the first-class label. Diana swallowed. I thought there might have been a change. Yet you did not verify, he replied. Evan scoffed. Look, I made a quick decision, and now this is blowing up for no reason. For no reason, the captain repeated quietly. A paying passenger was humiliated, lied to, and stripped of her seat without cause. And you believe there is no reason to address what you did. Evan rubbed his forehead. She's overreacting. That's what this is. Alana heard that, the dismissal, the minimization, the attempt to turn her composure into irrationality. The familiar sting returned for a brief moment before dissolving into something steadier. She stepped toward the galley entrance, not intruding, simply making her presence known. The captain saw her and straightened. Dr. Rivers, he said respectfully, I apologize for what you've endured. We are handling the matter. She nodded once. Thank you. Her voice was calm, balanced, but the tremble of vulnerability lived somewhere behind her ribs, and she knew the captain sensed it. A small crowd of passengers watched silently. The influencer in 1A lifted his camera halfway before lowering it again, unsure now if pointing a lens in her direction would backfire. For the first time since she boarded, he seemed aware of the weight of his role in this. Captain Reynolds stepped back, giving Alana space to speak if she wished. She didn't immediately. She simply looked at Evan, whose cheeks had flushed with anger or embarrassment, or both. Mr. Marshall, she said softly, do you truly believe I had no reason to object? He rolled his eyes. I made a standard call. A standard call, she repeated, to take my seat, to ignore my status, to refuse every request for explanation. It wasn't personal, he muttered. Her gaze held him, steady and unwavering. It always feels personal when it keeps happening. Something flickered across Evan's face, a crack in his composure, a momentary realization that perhaps she wasn't reacting to a single incident, but to a lifetime of accumulated wounds. Captain Reynolds stepped forward again. Mr. Marshall, your actions were inappropriate, unprofessional, and discriminatory. Evan stiffened. Come on. Are we really using that word? We are, the captain replied firmly. Diana seemed to shrink in place, eyes darting anywhere except toward Alana. The captain continued, I've contacted operations. A supervisor will meet us at the gate. Until they arrive, Mr. Marshall, you will remove yourself from duty. Ms. Hale, you will remain but under review. Evan sputtered, incredulous. You can't just remove me. I can, and I have. His tone never rose. Your conduct jeopardized not only our passengers' dignity, but our airline's credibility. Evan stormed past them toward the jet bridge, nearly bumping into a passenger. Murmurs rose as the crowd watched him leave. Diana stood frozen, her hands clenched. She had not spoken a word since the reprimand. Her eyes lifted to meet Alana's for one fragile heartbeat. In them, Alana saw fear, confusion, regret, human complexity. The captain exhaled, the tension easing slightly. He turned back to Alana. I apologize again, he said. Please allow me to escort you to your seat. He gestured toward 1A. The influencer panicked, nearly knocking his drink over. I didn't know, he stammered. I mean, I wasn't trying to take anything from anyone. The guy offered it. Alana looked at him, noticing his trembling hands. His bravado had dissolved. What remained was a young man caught in a moment larger than his online persona could handle. She didn't want vengeance. She never had. She simply said, Please move. He shifted quickly, gathering his belongings with fumbling urgency. Within seconds, the premium seat was empty. Captain Reynolds gently guided Alana toward it. She lowered herself slowly into the wide, cushioned chair. The leather felt cool beneath her palms, yet the relief she expected didn't come immediately. Her chest remained tight, full of unexpressed emotion. Diana stepped closer. Her voice wavered. Dr. Rivers, I am sorry. The apology surprised Alana, not because it was undeserved, but because it sounded genuine. A small, real voice beneath the armor of protocol. Alana nodded once. I hope this becomes a learning moment. Diana swallowed hard. Yes, it will. The purser stepped away, trying to regain her composure as she prepared for departure. Passengers returned to their conversations, but something had shifted. They watched her differently now, some with respect, some with unease, some with shame, but no one looked through her anymore. As Alana settled into her seat, a deep exhale finally escaped her chest. She stared out through the small oval window. Clouds drifted lazily beyond the glass, untouched by human conflict. Inside her, the storm quieted. Not completely, but enough to breathe. She wasn't at the end of this journey. She was at the turning point, and she sensed something even larger was coming. The cabin settled into a tense stillness as the captain returned to the cockpit. Alana Rivers adjusted the seatbelt across her lap, letting the leather embrace her like a quiet kind of victory. Yet beneath the small triumph, a deeper unease lingered. She knew the confrontation was not fully resolved. A wound might be acknowledged, but acknowledgement did not equal healing. Healing came only after truth was named, accepted, and transformed. Across the aisle, a middle-aged woman leaned toward her. Her voice trembled slightly. What they did to you wasn't right. I'm glad you spoke up. Alana offered a gentle nod. Thank you. The woman gave a sympathetic look before returning to her own seat. Moments like these reminded Alana that injustice rarely happened in isolation. Every act, every slight rippled outward, shaping how others perceived themselves. Her courage fed theirs, and their recognition fed her strength in return. She inhaled slowly, letting the familiar scent of the aircraft cabin settle her thoughts. The hum of the engine vibrated softly beneath her feet. Both flight attendants moved with renewed caution, whispering instructions to one another. Their eyes flickered toward her, a mix of respect, uncertainty, and perhaps a little fear. The situation had shaken them, too. Diana Hale approached again, posture straighter this time, but the stiffness of defensiveness had softened. She carried a glass of sparkling water on a tray. Dr. Rivers, would you care for something while we prepare for departure? Alana met her eyes. Water's fine. Thank you. Diana placed it carefully on the small table beside her seat. If you need anything, please ring the call button. There was something earnest in her tone now, a shift from authority to humility, perhaps even introspection. Alana sensed it. Ms. Hale, she said gently, I appreciate your apology earlier. Diana's throat tightened. I meant it. I believe you did. Alana studied her face. But sincerity alone isn't enough. Understanding has to follow. Diana nodded slowly, her eyes dropping to the floor. I know. She stepped away quietly, leaving Alana alone with her thoughts. As the aircraft doors closed, the intercom crackled. Flight attendants, prepare for departure. The cabin dimmed slightly as the plane pushed back from the gate. Outside, the runway lights glowed in long parallel lines, like pathways drawn across the earth. Alana rested her head against the seat, letting her body relax for the first time since entering the airport. But her mind refused to settle. Her thoughts drifted back to her mother again. The quiet strength. The resilience lived, rather than spoken. The countless moments of silent endurance. Moments where neither of them had the power to push back the way Alana did today. Maybe that was why her chest ached. Because she knew her mother never received the justice she deserved. Because this small battle was not just hers. It belonged to generations. The aircraft accelerated, climbing steadily into the sky. The pressure in her ears popped gently as the plane pierced through layers of cloud, rising into clear air. Once they reached cruising altitude, the seatbelt sign turned off with a soft chime. The cabin brightened. Passengers adjusted pillows, retrieved tablets, or ordered drinks. Yet even as the atmosphere eased, the tension from earlier remained faintly present, woven into the quiet glances cast toward her. The influencer shifted nervously in his new seat further back in the cabin. He tilted his phone away from recording mode and stared at it instead, as if replaying the morning's events in his mind. For the first time, Alana felt a spark of empathy for him. He was young, immature, lost in the world of online validation, and maybe today would be a turning point for him too. Her thoughts were interrupted when the cockpit door opened again. Captain Reynolds stepped out and approached her row with deliberate steps. Dr. Rivers, he said softly. May I speak with you for a moment? Of course. He lowered his voice even more, conscious of the nearby passengers. Operations has informed me that our station manager at the departure gate, Mr. Miles Keaton identified serious procedural issues in Mr. Marshall's handling of your boarding. He is preparing a full report. Alana nodded. I'm glad the matter is being taken seriously. It is, he affirmed. Then he hesitated. But there is something else. She tilted her head slightly. Curiosity piqued. What is it? The captain exhaled. When I spoke with Mr. Keaton, he mentioned that your name seemed familiar to him. He reviewed your profile and realized who you are. Alana stiffened. She had hoped her professional identity would not factor into this moment. Not like this, Captain Reynolds continued. He is requesting to speak with you personally after we land. He said he believes your experience may reveal larger issues within our operations. Alana paused, her mind spinning. She had no intention of using her influence to gain special treatment. She never wanted fear, authority, or status to force someone to do what simple respect should have dictated from the start. Captain, she said calmly, I don't want my title to become the reason people suddenly care about fairness. Captain Reynolds nodded slowly. I understand, but the truth is, your voice carries weight. And right now, we need voices that can challenge systemic issues. I didn't ask for that weight, she whispered. No, he agreed gently. But sometimes responsibility comes not from desire, but from capability. His words echoed something her mother once said. Your strength will not always feel chosen. Sometimes it will feel assigned. Alana closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting the memory wash through her. Then she opened them again and spoke softly. I will talk to Mr. Keaton after we land. The captain inclined his head. Thank you. And please know, Dr. Rivers, you deserve none of what happened this morning. She let out a slow breath. I know. That strength you showed, he added. It affected everyone here more than you realize. With that, he returned to the cockpit, leaving her with a swirl of emotions she tried to untangle. A few minutes passed before the woman in row 2 leaned slightly toward her. I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you handled everything with grace. Most people would have exploded. Alana smiled faintly. Grace is not always easy. No, the woman agreed. But sometimes, it's the only thing that keeps the world standing. Alana appreciated that more than she let on. Another passenger raised a hand to get her attention. I saw what they did to you, he said. I'm sorry. You shouldn't have had to go through that. Alana nodded gratefully. Thank you. His voice softened. If people stayed silent every time something unfair happened, nothing would ever change. She absorbed those words. They reminded her of all the quiet fighters she had known throughout her life. People who pushed for dignity, even when no one watched. The aircraft glided smoothly through clear skies, sunlight now streaming through the window beside her. It painted her seat in a warm glow, softening the tension that had lived in her shoulders since morning. Alana sipped her water, letting the coolness soothe her throat. She felt tired, but not defeated. A deep resilience pulsed beneath the exhaustion, steady and unwavering. She knew Part 7 had been the tipping point. Part 8, the unfolding. And something more significant was forming on the horizon. Her phone buzzed once with a notification. She glanced down. A message from her assistant, visible on the screen without opening it. Call me when you land. Something urgent came up about the Westar contract. Her heart thudded. Suddenly, the story widened. The threads connecting this incident to her work were beginning to reveal themselves. She understood then. This was no longer just about a seat on a plane. Something larger was preparing to surface. Something that would link everything together. She placed her phone back on the table and leaned into the soft cushions of her seat. Whatever came next, she would meet it with the same stillness her mother taught her. A stillness that was not passive, but powerful. The aircraft glided through a smooth ribbon of sky, sunlight folding in through the windows like warm silk. Doctor. Alana Rivers watched the horizon as the plane leveled into steady flight, but her mind was far from peaceful. The message from her assistant lingered at the edge of her thoughts, sharp and unsettling. Something urgent about the Westar contract. The same airline she was sitting in now. The same system that had just humiliated her. Coincidence rarely traveled alone. And today, the world seemed determined to reveal its hidden threads. She adjusted her posture, leaning slightly back yet keeping her spine straight. Any attempt at relaxation felt temporary, like placing a fragile leaf over a chasm. Her mind churned through possibilities, contract negotiations, a dispute, a sudden change in leadership, or worse, a conflict of interest she wasn't aware of. Her phone remained on airplane mode, But even without seeing the full message, she felt the weight of it. As she stared out at the glowing expanse of clouds, a quiet knock on the partition beside her seat broke the silence. It was the younger flight attendant, the one who had stayed quiet during the confrontation earlier. Her hands fidgeted with the corner of a napkin, her nerves openly displayed. "Dr. Rivers," she said softly. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," Alana answered gently. "How can I help?" The attendant glanced down, choosing her words carefully. I wanted to say I'm sorry for what happened at the gate, and for how everything unfolded after." Alana nodded, offering a calm expression. "Thank you for saying that." The young woman stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I've worked with Mr. Marshall before. There were concerns, not formal ones, but moments where his judgments didn't feel right. Today was the first time someone stood their ground." Alana studied her face. She saw sincerity there, and fear, a fear familiar to anyone who knew what it felt like to witness wrongdoing, but lacked the safety to confront it. "Well, what's your name?" Alana asked gently. "Emily," she replied. "That means a lot." "Emily," Alana said, "speaking the truth is not always easy." Emily exhaled slowly, as if relieved to be understood. "I hope things get better after today." "So do I." Emily nodded respectfully before stepping away, returning to her duties. Her quiet confession lingered in the air, coloring the incident with deeper shades. This was not just a momentary lapse in judgment from one employee. It was a symptom, a sign of a system with fractures beneath the polished veneer. The captain's earlier words replayed in Alana's head. "Your voice carries weight. Your experience may reveal larger issues indeed, perhaps more than he realized." Moments later, a soft rustling behind her made her turn slightly. The influencer, seated several rows back now, stood awkwardly in the aisle. His phone hung around his neck, screen dimmed. He approached with small, hesitant steps. "Dr. Rivers," he asked. She nodded, inviting him to speak. "I just wanted to apologize for, taking your seat. And for what I said earlier, I didn't know the whole situation." Alana observed the fidgeting of his fingers, the tremble in his voice. This wasn't an act. The bravado he wore like armor on line had slipped away completely. "Thank you for apologizing," she responded. "I didn't earn that upgrade," he continued. "I just assumed the guy was doing me a favor. But after seeing what happened, yeah, I'm sorry." He swallowed hard, guilt turning his words soft. "And I deleted the footage. All of it. That surprised her." She tilted her head slightly. Why he shifted his weight? Because it felt wrong to benefit from someone else's pain. "I don't want to be that guy anymore." Alana allowed a faint smile. "Growth is difficult. I appreciate your honesty." He nodded once, grateful, and stepped back quietly to his seat. His apology, small as it seemed, touched a tender place inside her. Even flawed hearts could learn. Even careless people could evolve. She closed her eyes briefly. Humanity was complicated, but not hopeless. As the plane sailed forward, Diana Hale approached once more, carrying a small folder. Her movements were steady but filled with unspoken tension. She stopped beside Alana, holding the folder with both hands. "Dr. Rivers," she began, "Captain Reynolds wanted you to have this. It's a copy of your original boarding documentation. He also included an incident statement for you to review if you choose to file a formal complaint." Alana looked at the folder but didn't take it immediately. "Thank you." Diana hesitated. "I also wanted to say that I've requested additional training. I never realized how quickly assumptions can turn into harm." Alana's heart tightened, not with anger but with empathy. Diana was trying, really trying. "I'm glad to hear that," Alana said softly. Diana nodded, eyes glistening with humility, then retreated, leaving the folder on the small table beside her. Alana opened it slowly. Inside were printed copies of her ticket purchase, her loyalty status, and the seat assignment logs. Everything clearly showed her rightful place in 1A, the truth, in plain ink. She felt a subtle tremor in her chest. Proof mattered, not just for her, but for every unseen voice behind her experience. As she closed the folder, the plane shuddered lightly from a pocket of turbulence, not enough to cause alarm, but enough to signal change, the kind of shift that echoed the internal turning within her. Her assistant's message continued to hover in her mind. Westar contract. Urgent. Connected to today. She finally understood the sinking feeling forming in her gut. What if Westar's corporate leadership was already aware of systemic failures? What if they were assessing whether to renew their contract with her company because of ongoing internal conflicts? What if the incident she just experienced was not minor, but a symptom of a deeper rot? Her company, Rivers Aerotech, had been in negotiations with Westar for months. Their potential partnership promised a revolutionary integration of ethical AI monitoring into airline operations. The goal was safety, fairness, and accountability, a new era of aviation ethics. But resistance existed. She knew that. Old guard executives, outdated practices, pushback against transparency. Perhaps today was more than just humiliation. Perhaps it was the final piece she needed to understand the full picture. A chime echoed through the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, we will begin meal service shortly. The mundane announcement grounded her again. She gazed out the window. Clouds drifted like white mountains across the sky. The truth sat quietly beside her, heavy, necessary. This was no longer a story about a denied seat. This was about a system moments away from exposure. And she was no longer just a passenger. She was the witness, the catalyst, the stormbreaker. Whatever awaited her on the ground, she would meet it head on, with grace, with clarity, with strength carved from years of silent endurance. The descent into truth had begun, and she was ready. The aircraft drifted into a tranquil patch of sky, its engines humming steadily like a distant choir. Dr. Alana Rivers sat motionless, fingertips gently brushing the closed folder beside her. Every detail inside it held meaning, evidence of truth, evidence of what she had endured, but more importantly, evidence of what had been allowed to happen unchecked for far too long. She gazed through the narrow window. The world below looked peaceful, an endless quilt of clouds stretching toward the horizon. Yet she knew peace was an illusion. Systems were built by people, and people carried their flaws everywhere they went, into airports, into planes, into boardrooms, even into the skies. A soft rustle approached from behind her. Emily, and the young flight attendant, stopped beside her seat once again. Dr. Rivers, she whispered, we're starting preparations for landing soon. Is there anything you need before we descend? Alana offered a warm but faint smile. No, thank you. I'm all right. Emily hesitated. Her eyes flickered with something like protectiveness. Captain Reynolds told us a supervisor will be waiting in the jet bridge. He said Mr. Keaton asked that you not be approached by anyone except designated personnel. Alana raised an eyebrow. Is there a specific reason? Emily swallowed, shifting her weight. There's talk among the crew that this incident might not be isolated. Mr. Keaton sounded concerned. That aligned with Alana's growing suspicion. She nodded once. Thank you for letting me know. Emily stepped away, leaving a lingering sense of loyalty in her wake. The young woman had courage. It shone through in small ways, but unmistakably. The cabin lights brightened slightly, signaling that the transition into descent procedures was beginning. Passengers adjusted their belongings, placed devices back into seat pockets, or took final sips of drinks. The atmosphere felt like the quiet before a storm, though most aboard had no idea how much turbulence awaited them on the ground. As she fastened her seatbelt, her phone vibrated softly once more. Even in airplane mode, a cued message flashed across her lock screen preview, revealed by a momentary software glitch. Board changing? Keaton requests immediate briefing. Critical for contract. Her pulse quickened. A briefing. Critical. Board changing. This was larger than she imagined. She closed her eyes, centering her breath the way she had learned during long nights negotiating billion-dollar mergers. With every inhale, she focused on control. With every exhale, she let go of the rising anticipation. Something was coming. She felt it in her bones, like a shift in wind pressure before a major storm. A few rows behind her, the influencer cleared his throat. Excuse me, Dr. Rivers. She turned slightly, keeping her demeanor open. He leaned forward, his voice low enough not to disturb others. I didn't want to bother you again, but I watched your interview once, the one about leadership and the weight of representation. I didn't realize it was you until 10 minutes ago. Her eyes softened with recognition. That interview had aired years ago, during her early CEO tenure. It was a vulnerable piece, more vulnerable than most corporate executives were willing to be. I appreciate that you remember it, she replied. He swallowed hard. I didn't understand it back then. Not really. I was younger. But today, I think I finally get it. Alana nodded, acknowledging the depth of what he was trying to express. Growth takes time. He smiled weakly. Thank you for being patient with people like me. She didn't respond with words. She simply offered a quiet nod, one filled with gentle acceptance. He sat back slowly, visibly relieved. As the flight attendant secured the cabin, Diana approached her seat once more. She stood straighter now, her composure firmer, yet tempered with humility. "Dr. Rivers," she said softly, "I wanted to let you know I've documented everything that happened. I included details from witnesses and staff. I made sure it was thorough." Alana studied her face carefully. "Thank you for doing that." Diana's voice lowered. "I should have acted sooner. I let my assumptions influence my decisions. I'm not proud of that." The admission carried weight and sincerity. It was the kind of self-reflection that could lead to real transformation. Alana responded gently. "What matters most is what you choose to do from here." Diana's throat tightened. She nodded, then stepped back to finalize landing tasks. As the cabin prepared for descent, the plane tilted slightly, banking toward the coastline. Golden sunlight filtered through the windows, illuminating Alana's hands resting quietly in her lap. She watched the shifting light, thinking of the years she spent fighting for equity in rooms where she was outnumbered, underestimated, or dismissed. She thought of the barriers she had overcome, the subtle acts of resistance she engaged in, just by existing in spaces where people like her were rarely welcomed. Today was another chapter in that lifelong narrative, but this time, she wasn't just fighting for herself. She sensed that the implications stretched far beyond one aircraft, one gate agent, one humiliating moment. This was about the structure behind it all, the corporate machinery, the contracted technologies, the systemic patterns hiding beneath polite language. The plane began its slow descent, the engines softening in pitch. Clouds drifted past the window in languid sweeps, revealing patches of coastline shimmering below. The air thickened slightly as the cabin adjusted for landing. Alana's pulse steadied. She felt her resolve crystallize. When the wheels touched down with a gentle thud, the cabin exhaled collectively. Passengers murmured with relief, unbuckling seatbelts mentally, even if not physically. Within moments, the intercom chimed. "Welcome to San Francisco. Please remain seated until the seatbelt sign is turned off." Alana closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the moment. This city held the next phase of whatever was unfolding. San Francisco, home of her company, home of innovation, home of disruption, and perhaps today, home of accountability. When the seatbelt sign blinked off, passengers rose slowly to gather belongings. Alana remained seated, understanding that she would not exit like everyone else. Someone was waiting for her, someone who could change the direction of the situation entirely. Emily returned to her side. "Mr. Keaton is standing just past the jet bridge. Captain Reynolds asked me to escort you first, before other passengers disembark." "Of course," Alana said quietly. "Lead the way." As she stood, she gathered her tote bag and the folder of evidence. The weight of both seemed heavier now, symbolic. She stepped into the aisle with graceful composure, even as dozens of eyes tracked her movements. She walked toward the open door of the aircraft, her footsteps measured, her presence undeniable. Emily guided her gently, offering a buffer of protection from curious stares. The moment she stepped into the jet bridge, she saw him, Miles Keaton, station manager, late 40s, sharp suit, eyes filled with urgency. He was not alone. Two senior directors stood behind him, their expressions grave. The air shifted instantly. Alana's breath caught in her chest. This was not a routine meeting. This was not a simple apology. This was the beginning of something much bigger than she expected. Something that would demand her strength, her truth, her leadership. She squared her shoulders. The descent into truth was over. Now came the collision. The jet bridge felt unusually still, as though the filtered airport air had thickened with expectation. "Doctor." Alana Rivers paused just a few steps in, letting her eyes adjust to the fluorescent lighting. The hum of the aircraft behind her faded as the door shut again, enclosing passengers inside while isolating her in this narrow corridor. Miles Keaton stepped forward immediately. "Dr. Rivers," he said, voice taut with something between urgency and dread. "Thank you for allowing us a moment of your time." She inclined her head. "Mr. Keaton." His jaw tightened. "There are developments you need to be aware of." I didn't want to address them in the cabin. Alana studied him. His posture was sharp, almost rigid. The two senior directors behind him mirrored that tension. Whatever they were carrying wasn't simple. "Let's take this conversation somewhere private," she said. Miles gestured toward a small operations office, just a short walk ahead. As they moved, Emily lingered near the aircraft door, watching with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Alana gave her a small nod, one that silently conveyed gratitude for the young woman's integrity. Inside the operations room, the door shut with a heavy click. The space was compact. functional, lined with screens displaying flight movements and schedules. It smelled faintly of ink, stale coffee, and quiet panic. Miles remained standing. "Dr. Rivers," he began, "there's no easy way to say this. We've discovered major discrepancies in the boarding system logs tied to your flight. And not just your flight. Patterns stretching back months." Alana folded her arms. Not defensive, but resolute. Discrepancies such as one of the directors, a woman named Karen Doyle, stepped forward. Multiple identity overrides. Unauthorized reassignments. Flags placed on specific passenger profiles, all seemingly triggered manually by a very small number of employees. Alana held her gaze firmly, triggered based on what criteria. Miles hesitated, then exhaled slowly. Patterns suggest racial and socioeconomic profiling. Some passengers were being quietly downgraded or reassigned based on their names, photos, or perceived vulnerability. A slow, cold sadness spread through Alana's chest. Not surprise, not shock. Just the familiar ache that came when truth aligned with instinct. Karen continued, "You were targeted because someone assumed you couldn't possibly be a first-class passenger in your attire. They made a judgment, a wrong one, a damaging one." Alana looked down briefly, not in defeat, but in reflection. This kind of behavior doesn't grow in isolation. Someone enabled it. Someone ignored it. Miles nodded gravely. "You're right, and that's part of why we're standing here." He exchanged a glance with Karen. "There's more." Alana's pulse steadied. "Go on." Miles tapped the tablet in his hand. A screen lit up displaying a series of boarding logs. "Our tech team identified 3 separate access points into the system within minutes of your check-in. All masked under senior staff permissions," Karen added. "But those permissions were revoked months ago. Someone forged them." "So someone hacked the system internally?" Alana asked. "Not exactly." Miles swallowed. "We've traced the activity to a contractor, one who works with a subsidiary of your own corporation." Alana stilled. "My corporation," she repeated quietly. "Yes," Karen said. "More specifically, part of your predictive logistics division." The irony struck with a deep, sharp sting. Her company, built to improve efficiency and fairness in global travel, might have indirectly empowered someone to manipulate an airline system for discriminatory purposes. Alana breathed slowly, letting the weight of that sink in. "What's the name of this contractor?" Miles hesitated. "We were hoping you could help us identify them. The digital fingerprinting matches tech used by Sterling Dynamics, but it's nearly impossible to trace without internal knowledge." Her mind raced through potential access points, contracts, teams, regional consultants, vendors. Only a handful had the skill to manipulate airline infrastructure. She met Miles' eyes. "There are people in my industry who believe data can be leveraged discreetly to maximize profit. They forget that discretion can turn into exploitation." Karen's voice softened. "We're not accusing Sterling Dynamics, but someone used your company's tool set and your name." That struck deeper than she expected. Her name had long been a symbol of integrity in the industry. To see it twisted into a weapon for discrimination scraped something raw inside her. "What else have you uncovered?" she asked. Miles pulled another file on his tablet. "Our internal investigators believe the gate agent involved today, Evan Marshall, has been communicating with this contractor. They exchanged encrypted messages tied to seat availability patterns, premium passenger lists, and personal data." Alana's stomach turned. "So Evan wasn't just acting out of bias. He was profiting." "Yes," Miles said. "He made thousands in under-the-table seat deals. Some passengers paid cash, others paid through services. A few were influencers who promoted him quietly, calling it insider travel access." Disgust flashed across Alana's face. She wasn't angry at the greed itself. Greed was predictable. But combining greed with prejudice was a different kind of rot. Karen continued, "Diana Hale, your lead purser, didn't participate in the scam, but she enabled it through silence. She feared retaliation from people above her. But that fear let misconduct spread." Alana absorbed the layers. Bias, profit, fear, corporate shadows, her company's unintended involvement. Miles took a breath that trembled slightly. "We're preparing to terminate several employees immediately. Legal is coordinating. But before we proceed, Mr. Keaton requested we meet you first because you deserve to know the scope." Alana pressed her palm gently against the folder she carried. "What do you need from me?" Karen looked directly at her. "We need your cooperation in identifying the contractor who accessed the system. Without your help, they'll slip through cracks. And if they do, this doesn't end here." Alana considered the request carefully. She wasn't impulsive. She never let anger dictate her next move. But there was a clarity that came with injustice, a clarity that made decisions sharper. She lifted her chin, I'll help, but I need transparency, full access to your findings. And I want a say in how this is addressed publicly. Miles nodded instantly. Agreed. We'll give you everything. Alana lowered her voice. This won't stop with firing employees. You'll need a systemic overhaul, and you'll need it soon. Miles exhaled. I know. For a moment, silence settled, heavy but purposeful. Then he added, almost quietly, I'm sorry this happened to you. To anyone. Alana held his gaze. It didn't just happen to me. I was simply the one who refused to accept it quietly. A new voice sounded from the doorway. That's exactly why we need you. They all turned. A tall man stood there, tailored suit pressed perfectly, face familiar from industry conferences and headlines. Sean Mercer, Vice President of Corporate Affairs for the airline. Alana's breath caught. If Sean Mercer was here, the stakes were about to escalate dramatically. Sean Mercer closed the door gently behind him, shutting out the distant hum of the terminal. The quiet inside the operations room deepened instantly, as though the walls themselves recognized the gravity of his arrival. His sharp eyes moved from Alana to Miles and then to Karen, assessing the tension in the air. Dr. Rivers, he said, voice calm and controlled. I apologize for not getting here sooner. I flew in from Chicago the moment I was briefed. Alana regarded him steadily. She had met Sean twice before at industry panels. Each time, he carried an air of strategic clarity, the kind that made people forget their rehearsed lines and speak honestly. Today, though, there was something else beneath the polish, a flicker of apprehension. You're here now, she replied. And we have work to do. He nodded. Before we move forward, I need to know exactly what you've been told. Miles quickly summarized the findings, the unauthorized seat changes, the forged credentials, the profiling patterns, the contractor connections. Sean listened without interrupting, but his jaw tightened incrementally, like a screw being turned a fraction too far. When Miles finished, Sean exhaled slowly. This is worse than I expected. Alana didn't respond immediately. She watched him instead, weighing whether he was here as an ally or merely damage control. She had known men like him throughout her career. Some stood firm when truth became uncomfortable. Others folded quietly under pressure. She needed to know which version she was dealing with today. Sean opened a thin case and placed a tablet on the desk. I'm going to show you something we have not shared with anyone outside of the executive circle. Karen's brows rose. Is this about the audit logs? No, Sean said. It's about payment trails discovered last night. He tapped the screen. A diagram bloomed across it. Lines, arrows, account names, transaction dates, all interconnected. These funds move through 6 countries, he explained. Small amounts, all under reporting thresholds. They originate from a private consultancy based in Nevada. Alana leaned in. Which consultancy? Sean enlarged one of the nodes. The name pulsed faintly in the center. Blue Horizon Analytics. Alana felt her breath hitch. The name was familiar in the way a shadow becomes familiar when it appears at your front door too often. They've worked with companies adjacent to my sector, she said, but Sterling Dynamics has never contracted with them. Correct, Sean replied, but their recent activity involves tools that mirror code used by your enterprise division. So someone stole our work, Alana murmured, or someone who once worked with us decided to repurpose it. Karen looked between them. Who would have access to that code? Alana's gaze softened in a way that suggested pain rather than simple recollection. Someone who left the company last year. Sean straightened. Do you know their name? She hesitated, not out of uncertainty, but out of the heaviness that came with the realization forming at the edges of her thoughts. Alex Lane, she said quietly. A contractor who worked remotely for 18 months. Brilliant, capable, but impatient for money and attention. He kept pitching shortcuts. We shut him down. He resigned. Sean made a slow, thoughtful sound. Miles whispered. We found messages between Evan Marshall and someone using a burner identity that matches Lane's style of communication. Alana closed her eyes briefly. I tried to give him guidance, she said, voice low. I reminded him that our work impacts real lives. He dismissed it, said principles were expensive. Sean placed his tablet flat on the desk. That same contractor may have weaponized your innovation against passengers who had no power to fight back. The sentence settled like ash in the room. Alana opened her eyes again. Their calmness had hardened. Then he underestimated the wrong passenger today. A knock sounded at the door. Miles opened it to find Emily standing there, wringing her hands. Her eyes were anxious but determined. Mr. Keaton, I'm sorry to interrupt, but someone in the cabin is asking for Dr. Rivers. He said he needs to speak with her urgently. Sean frowned. A passenger. Emily nodded. He didn't give his name, but he said he was the one who bought the seat she was bumped from. Alana tilted her head. The influencer, Emily's expression tightened. He said he's not an influencer. And he wants to explain what happened. Sean exchanged a glance with Miles. This might be important. Alana considered for a moment, then rose. Let's talk to him. Emily led the group back toward the aircraft. The jet bridge felt longer this time, as though the air itself was stretching in anticipation. When they reached the cabin, passengers turned curiously. Some whispered. Some looked away. But one man stood up immediately from row 2. He was slim, late 40s, wearing a navy sport jacket that didn't quite hide his discomfort. His hands trembled slightly as he clasped them together. Dr. Rivers, he said. She approached him with measured steps. You asked for me. His voice cracked as he spoke. I want to apologize. I didn't know the seat wasn't mine legitimately. Sean studied the man. Then how did you acquire it? The man swallowed. Evan offered it. He said there was a cancellation. Said first-class seats sometimes opened up if you knew who to talk to. I paid him $400 cash. Miles stiffened. You paid him directly? Yes, the man whispered. I travel for chemotherapy. I don't have much money. But the legroom helps. I thought he was doing me a favor. Alana's heart shifted, an ache blooming quietly behind her ribs. The man's voice carried no arrogance. Only fatigue? Only need? She asked gently. Did Evan tell you anything else? The man looked at the floor. He said he was helping people who didn't fit the usual first-class look. He said rich travelers wasted space, and he preferred giving opportunities to ordinary people. Sean's face darkened. He framed it as charity. The man nodded, ashamed. I see now it wasn't. I should have asked more questions. Alana shook her head. You aren't at fault. Someone took advantage of your situation. His eyes shone. Thank you. I didn't want to walk away without telling you the truth. She placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. You did the right thing. Emily stepped closer. We can arrange proper assistance for your next flight. The man's shoulders sagged with relief. After he returned to his seat, Alana turned to Sean. This isn't just corruption. It's manipulation of vulnerable passengers. Sean nodded grimly. The investigation just became a criminal case. Miles spoke quietly. We're ready to proceed however you direct. Dr. Rivers. Alana inhaled deeply. The injustice of the morning had transformed into something even more tangled, a web of wrongdoing that stretched farther than personal insult. But she did not feel overwhelmed. She felt decisive. Then we begin the next phase. She said, we confront those responsible. All of them. The room stilled. Even the hum of the aircraft seemed to pause. The operations room felt even smaller when they returned from the cabin. Tension clung to every surface, as if the air itself understood that the situation had crossed a threshold. What had started as a single act of discrimination was becoming something far more dangerous, something systemic, something orchestrated. Sean Mercer closed the door behind them, his expression tightened by the weight of the man's confession. This confirms a full-scale scheme, he said quietly. We're no longer dealing with isolated misconduct. Alana lowered herself into a chair, the exhaustion of the day pressing faintly against her spine. She wasn't physically tired. Something deeper stirred, a mix of anger, sorrow, and a sharpening clarity she had learned to trust. Karen Doyle rested her tablet on the table. We need to freeze all access to the boarding system. Immediately. If Alex Lane is monitoring activity, he may already know we're onto him. Sean nodded. It is working on it. But there's resistance from mid-level managers who fear blowback. Some of them approved Evans' overrides without verifying them. Alana's voice grew firm. Then they were complicit, even if indirectly. Miles shifted, his eyes flicking between the three of them. There's something else. I didn't want to mention it before confirming details, but after hearing the passenger's statement, I pulled more data. He held out a printout. Alana took it, scanning the document slowly. What is this, she asked. Miles took a steady breath. A preliminary list of every passenger downgraded manually in the last 6 months. Alana felt a cold tightening in her chest. How many Miles answered with a low voice? More than 90, most of them women of color. The silence that followed was suffocating. Karen covered her mouth, stunned. Sean ran a hand along his jaw, staring blankly at the wall for several seconds. 90! 90 people whose dignity had been quietly stolen without anyone noticing. 90 who never learned what had really happened. Alana placed the paper down with measured calm. She refused to let rage steer her, even though it pulsed beneath her skin. "This stops today," she said. Sean nodded. "Agreed." Miles stepped forward. "There is one more thing. A few of those passengers filed complaints. Not formal ones, just messages through customer service." Alana leaned in. "How did the airline respond?" Miles hesitated, shame coloring his features. "The complaints were redirected, watered down. Some disappeared entirely." Karen's eyes filled with painful realization. So the system wasn't just exploited, it was insulated. Sean closed his eyes briefly. "We're standing in the middle of an operational failure." Alana spoke with quiet intensity, and a moral one. Her tone was not accusatory. It was truth wrapped in restraint, and that truth reshaped the atmosphere of the room. Sean sat opposite her, hands clasped tightly. "Dr. Rivers, the board is meeting in a few hours. They already know you were involved in an incident, but they don't know the scale of what we're dealing with. Not yet." Karen glanced at him sharply. "We're not hiding this." "No," Sean said, "but we need to present it tactically. If we overwhelm them at once, they'll prioritize reputation over reform." Alana understood instantly. "You want someone credible leading the conversation? Someone whose voice carries public trust?" Sean met her eyes. "I want you." Miles inhaled, startled. "You want Dr. Rivers to address the board?" Sean nodded. "The only reason we're uncovering this so quickly is because she refused to accept the humiliation quietly. Her presence will make them listen," Karen added softly. "Your leadership reputation carries weight. They won't dismiss you." Alana straightened a little. "If I speak, I won't sanitize anything." Sean offered a slight, solemn smile. "That's exactly what we need." Before another word could be spoken, the door swung open abruptly. A breathless operations runner stepped in. "Mr. Mercer, security just detained Evan Marshall. They found something on him." Miles stiffened. "What did they find?" The runner swallowed. "A phone. One he tried to destroy before we intervened." Sean rose from his chair. "Is the device intact?" "Partially," the runner said. "Enough for IT to recover messages." Karen stood as well. "Where's he now?" "Waiting in conference room C," the runner said. "Demanding representation?" Alana's gaze sharpened. What was he trying to destroy? The runner held up a small evidence bag. Inside lay fragments of a cheap smartphone, cracked but not entirely dead. "Encrypted chats," he said. "Lots of them." Sean looked at Alana. "We should go." Alana stood. Her voice remained steady. "Let's hear what he has to say." They walked together through the narrow hallway connecting the operations wing to a cluster of small conference rooms. The walls were lined with photos of past employees, smiling faces from training graduations and anniversary celebrations. It felt strange walking past those cheerful images, knowing the shadow hiding beneath the organization. When they reached conference room C, 2 security officers stood outside. One of them opened the door. Inside, Evan Marshall sat slumped in a metal chair. The arrogance he had displayed at the gate was gone. His eyes darted nervously from person to person, landing last on Alana. He flinched. "You," he whispered. "I didn't think you'd be part of this." Alana stepped forward calmly. "The moment you tampered with my name, you involved me." Evan shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't mean for things to get this big." Sean folded his arms. "They got this big because you helped build something designed to stay hidden." Evan's jaw clenched. "I just followed instructions." "Who's Alana?" asked. He looked away. "I don't know their real name." Karen leaned in. "But you communicated with them." "Yes," he admitted quietly. "They told me which seats to move, who to replace, who to push down. I thought they worked high up in the company." "You didn't question the ethics?" Alana asked. Evan's mouth twisted. "Sometimes, but the money. It made things feel easier." Feet shifted behind her. Someone exhaled. The truth, even when simple, was heavy. Sean pressed. "What did you do with the payments bills?" Evan muttered. "Rent? My sister's medication? I wasn't trying to hurt anyone." Alana spoke softly. "Good intentions don't erase harm." Evan's eyes flicked up. "I know, but I wasn't the one selecting the profiles. That was Elaine." The room fell still. "You're certain?" Sean asked. Evan nodded miserably. "He sent me lists, names, instructions. sometimes payment codes for influencers who promoted him. He guaranteed protection, said everything was cleared from above, and you believed him, Alana said. Evan wiped a hand across his face. I wanted to. Sean stepped back. We've heard enough for now. Security escorted Evan out. The door closed behind him with a final sounding click. Alana exhaled slowly. Lane is the root. Sean nodded. And he's about to cause a corporate earthquake? Karen spoke quietly. The board meeting is in 3 hours. Miles looked at Alana. Will you address them? Alana's answer came without hesitation. Yes. Sean nodded once. Then today becomes the day. Everything changes. Alana lifted her chin with quiet resolve. She hadn't planned to tear down a corrupted system today, but sometimes justice didn't wait for permission. Sometimes truth demanded a fire, and she was ready to strike the match. The hallway leading toward the executive wing felt unusually long, a polished corridor of glass and muted colors that absorbed every footstep. Dr. Alana Rivers walked at a steady pace between Sean Mercer and Karen Doyle, with Miles Keaton trailing slightly behind. None of them spoke. Words seemed too fragile for the moment, too small for what awaited. 3 hours remained before the board meeting, yet the building buzzed with a tense energy. Staff hurried past with clipped movements and averted eyes, as though the air carried something volatile. Alana felt no fear, only a deep, grounded calm. Years of navigating high-stake environments had taught her to remain still inside, even when the world shook around her. What she felt now was purpose sharpening, becoming more defined with every step. Sean finally broke the silence when they reached the restricted elevator. Once we're inside the briefing room, everything changes. The moment you speak, the board will be forced to confront what they've ignored. Alana turned to him. My goal isn't to embarrass anyone, it's to stop the harm. Sean's voice lowered. That's why you're the one they'll listen to. Karen scanned her tablet as the elevator doors slid open. We've compiled all the evidence you might need. Message logs, transaction maps, passenger lists, behavior patterns. Everything is flagged and cross-checked. Alana stepped into the elevator. Thank you. As the car ascended, the floor numbers flickered steadily upward. The sensation reminded her of every time she'd walked into a room where she wasn't expected to lead, then had to prove she belonged. But today felt different. She wasn't proving anything. She was reclaiming what mattered. The doors opened to a quiet reception area where 2 assistants sat behind a large marble desk. One of them rose quickly. Mr. Mercer, the board requested an urgent pre-meeting briefing the moment you arrived. Sean nodded. We'll head to the private conference suite. The assistant's eyes flicked to Alana. Recognition dawning. Dr. Rivers, the board has been expecting you. The emphasis in her voice wasn't disrespectful. It was awe mixed with cautious hope. Alana nodded politely and continued forward. Inside the private suite, a long rectangular table dominated the center. Screens lined the walls, already loaded with flight data and internal reports. A carafe of water and untouched glasses sat in the center, as if everyone who entered earlier had been too tense to drink. Alana walked to the window for a moment, looking out at the distant airfield. Planes rolled steadily across runways, carrying people whose lives intertwined with systems they rarely saw. Systems built on trust now fractured. She turned around when she sensed someone enter. A tall woman with silver hair and an authoritative presence walked toward them. Eleanor Grant, chairwoman of the corporate board. Behind her came 3 other senior members, each with expressions ranging from guarded curiosity to outright concern. Dr. Rivers, Eleanor said, extending a hand. Thank you for being here on such short notice. I understand you experienced a significant issue during travel. Alana shook her hand with a steady grip. The issue is larger than what happened to me personally. I gathered as much. Eleanor replied. Sean gestured for everyone to take their seats. Once they did, the room stilled with a quiet intensity. We have uncovered systemic misconduct, Sean began. But I believe Dr. Rivers can explain the gravity better than any of us. Eleanor nodded toward Alana. The floor is yours. Alana stood slowly. She didn't use the screen. She didn't lift the folder. She began with the truth as it lived inside her. This morning, I was denied the first-class seat I purchased. I was told I didn't fit the assumptions of someone who belonged there. What began as a single act of bias has turned out to be a symptom of an internal operation affecting many passengers. The board members leaned in. Alana continued, voice measured yet unflinchingly direct. Your system was manipulated. Seat assignments were altered illegally. Passengers of certain backgrounds were repeatedly downgraded. Employees were paid under the table. Vulnerable travelers were targeted because they couldn't fight back. A murmur rippled across the table. Eleanor spoke. We reviewed some preliminary data. But are you saying this was organized? Yes, Alana replied. And the organization extended outside this airline. It involved a contractor using stolen or repurposed tools originally developed by companies like mine. Eleanor's expression stiffened. Who is responsible? Evidence points to a former contractor named Alex Lane, Alana said. He collaborated with employees like Evan Marshall, who altered boarding logs and profited from unauthorized upgrades. One of the board members, a man with narrow glasses, tapped his pen nervously. Is there proof Sean activated the near screen? The encrypted message logs appeared, followed by transaction trails. But the board's attention returned immediately to Alana. You should understand, she said gently, that your policies didn't fail. Your oversight did. When complaints came in, someone redirected them. When patterns formed, someone ignored them. This didn't grow in darkness. It grew in silence. A heavy quiet fell. Eleanor let out a long exhale. Dr. Rivers, we owe you a sincere apology. Alana met her gaze. I don't need an apology. I need accountability, Karen added. We are prepared to terminate several employees involved directly, pending legal review. That's only the first step, Alana said. You need a full audit, a restructured reporting system, mandatory ethics oversight, and complete transparency with the public. Another board member asked, and what would transparency look like? In your view? Honesty, Alana answered. Not the polished version, the real version. People don't trust corporations that hide their failures. They trust ones that repair them. Eleanor closed her notebook slowly. You're recommending a complete overhaul. Yes, Alana said. Your passengers deserve it, and your employees need it. The room absorbed her words with a solemn gravity. Then Eleanor asked a question Alana wasn't expecting. Would you be willing to assist us as an external ethics advisor in this process? Karen's eyes widened. Miles inhaled sharply. Even Sean appeared caught off guard. Alana remained still. You want my involvement? We need it, Eleanor said plainly. Someone who understands leadership, systems, and lived experience. Alana considered this carefully. If I agree, I will not soften the truth. I will not protect anyone from consequences, and I will not work under a hollow mandate. Eleanor nodded. We wouldn't ask you to. Before Alana could respond, the door swung open unexpectedly. A frantic communications officer stumbled in. I'm so sorry, but you need to see this immediately. Everyone turned toward the screen. He tapped a button. A live news broadcast appeared. The headline stretched across the bottom. Breaking news. Whistleblower leaks documents exposing discriminatory upgrade scheme at Westar Airlines. The room froze. Who leaked this? Sean demanded. The officer shook his head helplessly. We don't know, but it's everywhere. Alana watched the screen silently. The scandal she had just laid out privately was now public, out of their control, spreading faster than any boardroom decision could contain. Eleanor stood abruptly. This changes everything. Sean's voice tightened. We need to get ahead of it. Karen exhaled shakily. Lane must have panicked and tried to burn the whole thing down, Miles whispered. Or someone wants the airline to fall. Everyone turned to Alana, waiting for her reaction. She didn't panic. She didn't flinch. This isn't the collapse, she said quietly. This is the unveiling. The room stilled completely, and for the first time, they understood the magnitude of what they were facing. The broadcast continued to play in stunned silence. Each passing second brought new headlines, new speculation, new angles of outrage. The anchors spoke rapidly, their tones urgent. A swarm of graphics framed leaked documents, passenger complaints, and internal memos that should never have seen daylight. The boardroom felt suddenly smaller, as though the walls had drawn in to hear every word. Eleanor Grant lowered herself slowly into her chair, the weight of the crisis settling visibly across her shoulders. How long has this been live? The communications officer stammered. 7 minutes, ma'am. 7 minutes, Sean repeated under his breath. That's enough time for half the country to see it. Miles paced in a tight circle, running both hands through his hair. Karen sat rigid, her tablet trembling slightly in her grip. The quiet hum of the fluorescent lights sounded louder than ever. Alana remained standing. Her posture was steady, her breathing controlled. She felt the familiar clarity that came when chaos sharpened the world into unmistakable lines. Panic had overtaken the room, but she stood outside of it, observing with calm precision. Eleanor finally spoke. We need immediate containment. Sean looked at her sharply. Containment is no longer an option. This is a full-blown public scandal, Karen added. The footage is spreading across multiple platforms. People are tagging passengers who flew with us recently. Journalists are requesting statements. Miles stopped pacing. This isn't a leak. It's a detonation. The communications officer stepped closer. There's more. Several prominent figures have begun posting personal stories about being bumped from their seats. They weren't sure if it was discrimination at the time, but now they're connecting it. The board members looked as though the floor had dropped out beneath them. Eleanor turned toward Alana, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and expectation. Dr. Rivers, what do you advise? Alana inhaled slowly. Her voice emerged calm, almost soothing. First, understand that the public does not want polished statements. They want truth. They want responsibility, and they want change. Karen nodded quickly. So we release everything? No, Alana said gently. You release honesty, not chaos. You need clarity before transparency. Sean leaned forward. So what's the first step? Accountability, she replied. Real accountability. And it must begin today. Eleanor folded her hands. Meaning what specifically? Alana met her gaze directly. You suspend every employee connected to the scheme immediately. You announce a full independent audit, and you commit to making the findings public. Miles swallowed. That's going to ignite investors, Alana responded without hesitation. It's also going to restore trust. Investors care about stability. Stability comes from integrity. Sean nodded slowly. She's right. Eleanor tapped her fingers against the table. And what about Lane? If the leak came from him, then he's already moved to protect himself. Karen glanced at the screen. We need law enforcement involved. We will inform them, Alana said. But you also need to address the public directly. Today, not tomorrow. Eleanor's face paled. Me, yes, Alana said. People need to hear from the one person who can speak with full authority. Sean took a careful breath. We can arrange a press conference or a streamed broadcast. Do both, Alana said. The world will be watching. Silence hovered again, heavier this time, but also more focused. Eleanor finally rose from her chair. We'll begin preparations, but Dr. Rivers, would you stand beside me when I speak? The question landed softly but powerfully. Alana felt every eye shift toward her. She sensed their hope, their uncertainty, their need for reassurance. She also felt the responsibility pressing gently against her chest. She thought about the 90 passengers. She thought about the manipulation. She thought about the quiet pain of those who never knew why they were treated differently. Then she nodded. Yes, she said quietly. I will stand with you. Relief washed through the room, but before anything else could be said, the communications officer's tablet buzzed loudly. He read the notification, and his eyes widened. What now? Sean asked. We just received an anonymous message. The officer said it includes a video and a statement. Karen straightened. From who? The officer hesitated. From Alex Lane. The room froze. Sean gestured. Play it. The officer tapped the screen. A video appeared. Alex Lane sat in a dim room, his face half lit by the glow of a computer monitor. His voice was flat, almost cold. I know you're looking for me, he said. So let's skip the drama. I didn't leak the documents. Someone else beat me to it. But I can tell you this, the system you're trying to fix isn't broken. It's functioning exactly the way some people inside your company designed it to. Sean clenched his jaw. Alex continued. I wasn't the mastermind. I was the mechanic. The one who made the tools work. The names, the targets. The overrides that came from someone with a lot more power. Eleanor stiffened. What is he implying, Watch? Alana said softly. Alex leaned closer to the camera. If you want to know who engineered this, follow the early overrides. Follow who approved them. Follow the silence. The video cut off abruptly. The room erupted in anxious voices. Karen murmured to herself. Someone higher up. Someone with access, Miles whispered. This explains the redirections. Complaints disappearing. Overrides approved. Sean turned to Alana. He's pointing to someone inside the executive structure. Alana's voice remained calm. Then you have to trace every approval, every signature, every access point. Eleanor looked shaken. If he's telling the truth, then we're dealing with internal sabotage at the highest level. Alana stepped toward the center of the room. This is why you must act now. Delaying only gives the real orchestrator time to hide. Sean ran a hand through his hair. We need the full IT team, and legal, and security. Alana nodded. And while they work, we prepare the public statement. The world already knows what happened. Now they must know what you plan to do. Eleanor steadied herself. We'll move forward. As the room mobilized, calls were made, documents pulled, teams assembled. The structure of the crisis shifted. Chaos was giving way to order, fear to determination. Alana stepped aside for a moment, allowing the storm of voices and decisions to swirl around her. She closed her eyes briefly, grounding herself. This wasn't about one passenger, or one flight, or one corrupted employee. This was about everyone who had been quietly pushed aside, everyone who was told they didn't belong, everyone whose voice had been ignored. She reopened her eyes. Sean approached quietly. You're handling this better than anyone I've ever seen. Alana offered a faint but steady smile. I've been preparing for moments like this my entire life. He nodded with respect. We'll follow your lead. Alana turned back toward the room. We're not done, she said. The truth hasn't fully surfaced yet. And she felt it deep in her chest. A shift, a momentum building toward something larger, something inevitable. This wasn't the end of the fire. This was the moment before the blaze revealed everything. The executive floor transformed rapidly into a command center. Technicians hurried in and out with cables and equipment. Communications aides arranged lighting, microphones, screens. Legal advisors clustered around laptops, whispering urgently, their voices taut with strained professionalism. Even board members who normally occupied this space with quiet authority now moved with a nervous urgency that exposed how deeply the crisis had shaken them. Yet amid the turbulence, Alana Rivers stood still. She observed the transformation around her with a profound calm, the same quiet clarity that had guided her through every storm in her professional life. She had learned long ago that the moments demanding the most strength required the stillest mind. Her presence created a subtle gravity. People moved more carefully around her, as though sensing the significance of what she represented. Sean Mercer approached with a tablet in hand. The press conference is in 40 minutes, he said. We'll take the central atrium. Cameras are already setting up. Alana nodded. Have you confirmed the final wording? Sean grimaced. Legal is nervous. They want to soften everything. Reduce liability? She shook her head gently. Softening comes across as hiding, and hiding now will bury this company. Sean lowered the tablet. Then we'll do it your way. Across the room. Eleanor Grant stood at a table, reviewing notes with her head bowed. The chairwoman looked older than she had an hour ago, as though the scandal had carved itself into her expression. Yet when she lifted her gaze toward Alana, there was a resolve that had not been there before. May I speak with you privately? She asked. Alana followed her into a smaller adjoining conference space. The door closed softly behind them. For a moment, neither spoke. Eleanor leaned her hands on the table. Dr. Rivers, I want to make sure you understand what you are about to step into. Alana's expression remained calm. I do. No, Eleanor said softly. I don't think anyone truly understands until they are in it. She paused. This isn't going to be gentle. Journalists will question your motives. Some will accuse you of orchestrating this. Others will twist your presence into something political. Alana listened without flinching. Eleanor continued. Stepping into the spotlight means tying your name to our failure. Your reputation will be part of the story. Alana folded her hands. I am already part of the story. I lived it this morning. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. I am grateful, but I must ask one last time. Are you certain? Yes, Alana answered simply. Eleanor studied her face for a long moment, then exhaled slowly. Then let's face the storm together. They returned to the main suite. Dozens of people adjusted microphones, tested sound levels, rearranged chairs. The building had become a hive of frantic energy. Yet Alana walked through it with quiet certainty. Miles Keaton intercepted her. His face reflected exhaustion, regret, and something close to admiration. Dr. Rivers, I want you to know I'm fully cooperating. Whatever you need from my department, you'll have it. Alana placed a gentle hand on his arm. Thank you. Miles, today is not about punishment. It's about responsibility. He nodded, his eyes glistening slightly. Karen Doyle approached next, carrying a stack of documents. These are the audit confirmations and the passenger impact summaries. If the media asks about them, you'll have the details. Alana accepted them. I appreciate your effort. Karen swallowed. I wish we had uncovered this sooner. Alana met her gaze. Now that it's in the open, you have the chance to rebuild better. Karen nodded, visibly moved. Sean returned with an update. It's time. They escorted Alana and Eleanor down the main hallway toward the central atrium. The vibrations of noise grew louder with each step. Voices, camera shutters, the echo of reporters gathering. The building's open design created a dramatic descent. As they reached the staircase overlooking the atrium, Alana saw the crowd. News crews lined the lower level. Microphones pointed toward the podium. Screens flashed headlines in real time. Employees stood gathered along the upper railings, leaning forward with anxious curiosity. Thousands watched from their phones. When the crowd recognized Eleanor Grant, a murmur swept through them. But when they recognized Alana Rivers, the whispering intensified. Some pointed, some nodded, some looked relieved. The airline's internal staff knew her reputation. Many had heard her keynote speech on equity and aviation ethics years earlier. Some had read her articles. She wasn't a stranger. She was a voice they trusted. Eleanor stepped up to the podium. "Thank you all for being here on such short notice," she began, her voice strong but measured. "Today, we must address serious misconduct uncovered within our passenger operations." She paused and turned slightly toward Alana. "And we must acknowledge someone whose courage has brought this truth to light." Alana stepped forward. The room fell completely silent. She stood behind the podium and adjusted the microphone gently. The bright lights cast a soft halo around her, creating a striking contrast against the atrium's polished steel interior. She did not read from notes. She spoke from the depth of her lived truth. "This morning," she began, "I experienced something that many others have quietly endured without answers." Her voice carried the weight of sincerity. Without theatrics, without anger. "I was denied the seat I paid for because someone decided I did not belong there. That decision was rooted in bias. But what we have since uncovered reveals a system manipulated to harm many passengers, disproportionately women of color." A ripple of gas traveled through the crowd. "We now know that an internal scheme exploited vulnerable travelers, reassigned seats illegally, and concealed complaints. This was not a glitch. It was a choice. A series of choices made by individuals who valued profit and convenience over human dignity." She let that truth settle. But today is not only about exposing what went wrong. It is about choosing what must change. Behind her, Eleanor stood very still. "This airline is committing to a full independent audit, the removal of those responsible, and the restructuring of oversight to ensure transparency. But accountability cannot live only in the hands of institutions. It must live in the culture we build." Alana's voice softened. "I did not ask to become part of this story, but I believe in a simple truth: every person deserves to be treated with fairness, dignity, and respect the moment they step into an airport." The crowd hung on every word. "And I stand here today not for myself, but for every passenger who has ever felt unseen." Sean watched her with awe, Karen with pride, Miles with gratitude, Eleanor with resolve. Alana finished with a steady calm. "We cannot change what was done yesterday, but we can choose what tomorrow becomes. And today, we begin again." When she stepped back from the podium, the room erupted not with applause, but with something deeper. A wave of recognition, a collective exhale, a sense of witnessing something transformative. Reporters immediately shouted questions. Cameras flashed. Microphones stretched forward. But Alana didn't step back up. Her work had been done. Eleanor took the podium to address details and next steps. Sean ushered her away from the chaos, guiding her toward a quieter hallway at the edge of the atrium. As soon as they were clear of the crowd, Sean turned to her. "Dr. Rivers? That was extraordinary." She shook her head gently. "It was necessary." He smiled with genuine admiration. "You've changed the course of this company." "No," she replied softly. "The truth did." They walked together down the quiet corridor. For the first time all day, Alana felt her chest relax. Not fully, but enough. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Investigations would continue. Lane would have to be found. The larger orchestrator still lurked in the shadows. The road ahead was long, but something essential had shifted. She had stepped into the light, not as a victim, not as an outsider, but as a leader who refused to let silence bury justice. And the world had heard her. Alana Rivers' story reminds us of a seemingly simple, yet constantly challenged value: human dignity. When faced with injustice, everyone has a moment of choice: to bow down and accept it, or stand up and defend themselves. What makes Alana strong is not her power or position, but her composure, her dignity, and her belief that the right thing needs to be said. No matter how difficult the situation, not everyone is in a position to change a system, but everyone has the right to speak up when they are treated unfairly. It is a human right, a very normal right, but sometimes a luxury in modern life. The story also reminds us of the responsibility of organizations. Healing cannot be done by apologies, but by real action, by real change from within. For adult audiences, this story may evoke times when we have been doubted, overlooked, or made sacrifices to avoid trouble, but it also gives us hope that kindness, transparency, and courage can still create great change. This is not just a story of injustice righted. It is a gentle reminder that everyone deserves to be seen for who they are, not what they appear to be. Thank you for taking the time to listen. I hope that what you heard today was not only entertaining, but also a reminder that respect, fairness, and courage have a place in our lives. If you find the story meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to continue accompanying the journey full of emotions and human values. Thank you very much.